The Transcendent Function is a deeply illuminative essay written by Carl Jung in 1916, which documents Jung's early solution to the problem of how to deal with the unconscious. 3 years earlier, Jung had experienced a mental breakdown of sorts, and the method contained in this document results from his own experimental treatment of himself. This treatment involves a method termed active imagination as a means of accessing unconscious contents that persist just below the threshold of consciousness. Jung discusses the risks associated with such a method, and he also provides ways to safely manage and integrate the unconscious material. We proceed now with a simplified abridgment of the text. The term transcendent function refers to a psychological function that combines conscious and unconscious contents. It is comparable to the mathematical function of the same name. The conscious and unconscious often have different contents and tendencies because they compensate for each other. The conscious has a threshold intensity, causing weak elements to remain in the unconscious. Incompatible material is inhibited by the conscious and sinks into the unconscious. The conscious represents the present adaptation, while the unconscious holds forgotten personal experiences and inherited behavior patterns. The definiteness and directedness of the conscious mind are acquired traits that are essential for science, technology, and civilization. Impairments in these qualities increase social worthlessness, although creative individuals benefit from a permeable conscious-unconscious partition. Nevertheless, for professions requiring continuity and reliability, such individuals are often of little value. However, the directedness of consciousness comes at a cost, for it inhibits or excludes psychic elements that are incompatible with it. Our judgment determines which psychic material is deemed incompatible based on past experiences and known information. This judgment is biased, favoring one possibility over others. It tends to exclude new and unknown elements that could enrich the directed process. By making these judgments, the directed process becomes one-sided, even if rational judgment appears unbiased. One-sidedness is both an advantage and a drawback, as it can lead to a counterposition in the unconscious. This counterposition is not problematic until it carries significant energy. When tension increases due to excessive one-sidedness, the counter-tendency can break through into consciousness, often at crucial moments. This release of unconscious content can occur when it is least desired, such as a slip of the tongue, when trying to avoid saying something foolish. These critical moments possess high energy tension and can spark the emergence of unconscious material. In today's civilized life, concentrated and directed conscious functioning is necessary, but the more we distance ourselves from the unconscious, the more a powerful counterposition can arise within. Psychoanalysis has taught us the significance of unconscious influences. Many patients hesitate to end analysis due to the awareness of how the unconscious can disrupt their lives. Dream life and intrusions from the unconscious persist despite gaining self-knowledge, and so analysis is not a one-time cure, but rather an ongoing readjustment of psychological attitude. The method involves evaluating symbols in their true symbolic sense, expressing complex facts not yet grasped by consciousness. Associations provided by the patient play a crucial role in working out the symbol's meaning, as they point to the cultural significance of the symbol. While the analyst initially supports the transcendent function, the patient must eventually become independent. To produce the transcendent function, we need to access unconscious contents. Sources of unconscious material include interferences in consciousness, spontaneous fantasies, and symbolic actions. The easiest way to synthesize the conscious and unconscious is via the interpretation of dreams, which originate from low energy tension during sleep. However, dream interpretation poses challenges, and alternative sources offer more coherent and meaningful content. Developing the capacity for producing free fantasies can be achieved through exercises that eliminate critical attention. The reason we need to bring unconscious contents to the surface forcefully is to avoid their secret interference. Again, conscious directedness leads to one-sidedness. When the counteracting influences of the unconscious are suppressed, it intensifies the conscious process instead of regulating it. This can result in the unchecked assertion of conscious intentions at the expense of the whole. The ease of eliminating the counteraction correlates with the dissociability of the psyche and leads to a loss of instinct, which is necessary for civilized society. This loss is not a true atrophy, but rather a product of education serving individual interests. Self-observation and self-criticism are inadequate for establishing contact with the unconscious. Artificial aids like fantasy production or seeking external help may be necessary, especially when facing depressed or disturbed states of mind without apparent causes. Rational explanations alone cannot satisfy the patient's need to understand and find relief from the emotional disturbance. It is crucial not to repress or devalue these states, as they hold valuable energy for adaptive healing. To gain control over misplaced energy, one can start by immersing oneself in an emotional state and documenting any associated fantasies and thoughts. It's important to allow fantasy to flow freely without deviating from the original emotion. This process enriches and clarifies the affect, bringing it closer to consciousness, and creating a collaboration between the conscious and unconscious. Another approach is visual expression, where one draws or paints their mood. This aligns with the previous method as it combines conscious and unconscious influences. Depending on one's preferences, inner images, inner words, or bodily movements can also serve as vehicles for expressing the unconscious. These manifestations can be observed, recorded, and utilized to lay the foundation for the transcendent function. Engaging in automatic writing is another valuable means of accessing unconscious contents. After obtaining material from the unconscious, the next step depends on the individual's reaction when the conscious mind confronts it. Two main tendencies emerge: creative formulation and intuitive understanding. Creative formulation involves condensing motifs into symbols that stimulate creative fantasy and focus on aesthetic expression. Understanding, on the other hand, prioritizes grasping the meaning of the unconscious product with less emphasis on aesthetics. While aesthetic formulation concentrates on the formal aspect of the motif, intuitive understanding seeks to extract meaning from subtle hints in the material. It is important to recognize and balance these tendencies, as a compensatory relationship exists between them. The two ways should coexist and alternate, allowing for a balance between creation and understanding. To grasp the unconscious contents, it is crucial to give them shape and make them tangible, as clarity arises from visible form. However, aesthetic formulation stops at this point, without seeking meaning, sometimes leading individuals to mistakenly consider themselves as misunderstood artists. On the other hand, understanding has better chances of success when it begins with a well-formulated product rather than chance associations. Superficial understanding, driven by theoretical or moral considerations, arises when the initial material lacks development. After giving form to the unconscious content and understanding its meaning, the ego's relationship with this position becomes crucial. The ego takes the lead in the second stage, where opposites are brought together to produce a third, which is the transcendent function. Maintaining the equal value of the ego and the unconscious is essential, as both can have a restricting or overwhelming effect on each other. The ego must defend itself against affective factors that can overpower it, especially at the beginning of schizophrenia. Aestheticization and intellectualization can help mitigate dangerous affects, but should only be used when necessary. Freud's insight emphasized the importance of considering emotional factors in treating neuroses. The treatment is not a simple psychological cure, but a holistic renewal of the personality. Taking the counterposition of the unconscious seriously is essential, as it allows us to cooperate with consciousness, instead of disturbing it. Both the ego and the unconscious have equal authority in coming to terms with each other. One effective approach is to engage in a written dialogue where the ego and the other voice exchange valid arguments and modify conflicting standpoints through discussion. However, reaching agreement often requires a long and challenging conflict, demanding sacrifices from both sides. This process can also occur between patient and analyst, with the analyst serving as the devil's advocate. In today's world, people often struggle to value and consider the other person's argument, hindering the capacity for inner dialogue and outer objectivity. When visual products are involved, the ego should ask how they affect oneself to elicit illuminating answers. Directness and naturalness in the response enhance its value, even if theoretical understanding is not fully present. In some cases, wordless but suggestive feelings can be more valuable than eloquent discussions. The transcendent function emerges when arguments and emotions shuttle between opposites, generating tension and giving birth to a new situation. Understanding the outward forms and possibilities of the transcendent function is challenging, as we are influenced by personal biases and the desire for absolute truth. The process of coming to terms with the counterposition includes everything, widening consciousness through the integration of previously unconscious contents. The transcendent function not only enhances psychotherapeutic treatment, but empowers the patient to assist the analyst and break free from dependency. It allows for self-liberation and the courage to be who oneself truly is. And that brings us to the end of The Transcendent Function by Carl Jung. Be sure to check the description for videos on other essays from the collection in which this essay is found, being Volume 8 of Jung's collected works, or The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche. If you'd like to support this channel in making more videos, please consider contributing through the links below. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.